Hi, this is another iOS tutorial. Today I will be going over core data. Core data is basically a method of creating a persistent store. So what core data allows you to do is basically save data between different uses of your application. In other words, if I close it and open it up again, data is still there. So to use core data, first just what core data allows you to do is basically save data between different uses of your application. In other words, if I close it and open it up again, data is still there. So to use core data, first just open a project or start a project like you normally would, and then hit this checkbox. You can call it anything for here. And when you create it, it'll come attached with some of this boilerplate code. This is just the app delegate file. And in here we have the managed object context, the managed object model, and the persistent store coordinator. These are basically the three core parts of core data. It's called the core data stack. The context is like a scratch pad. That's like your local copy in memory of your app, and what you can do is you can add objects to it and you can remove objects to it, and then it doesn't actually save to the database right away. When you want to do that, you say context save. In other words, you use the save method of the manage object context, the instance method, and what we'll do is we'll call this persistent store coordinator. And what the store coordinator does is it makes SQLite stores for the data in your managed object context. This model is basically like the blueprint. In the same way classes are blueprint for objects, this model is the blueprint for our core data. And the file that's going to be associated with this is over here. And for our model, you can have entities, you can have attributes, and you can have relationships. You can also have fetch properties. We're not going to worry about that, but focus on entity, attribute, and relationship. Attributes are like, entity is like the name. It could be like a person. Attributes would be like name, height, and then relationships would be maybe they have an address and you want like zip code, name of street, but you just have another entity named address, and you establish a relationship between the two rather than having a million entities in one thing. So I've created a small example project here, and basically the idea, I'll show you how core data basically works. First I want to make sure that this text view keeps shrinking on me. So I'm going to expand it a little bit, and I think, here we go, width, height, and sorry about that. If we expand this here, and now I'm going to run this, all right. So I think there's nothing in this right now. So when we run, that text field should be empty, or it's actually a text view. It's not a text field. These are text fields. And let's see. No, there is one thing. Atom1 main is in there. And now if I add another one, like Bill 2, and the road name will be Apple Street. Okay, and I hit OK, it adds it. And basically if I close out and I open this again, all of those names are still there. That is the purpose of core data in a nutshell. Okay, I can also clear, close out, and it will clear. Okay, now if you look at our data model, our entities are person and address. A person has a name and an ID number, and then the address has a road name. And I've established a one-to-one relationship between the two. So for here, it really doesn't matter. You could just have three attributes, but in more complicated relational object models, you want to have these relationships, and it lets you basically manage the data more effectively. So the other thing to note is once you've created your model, you can do something to make it easier to code with it. So basically you want to go to new file, and you want to make, instead of, you normally make these Cocoa Touch classes, but you want to make something in core data called a managed object subclass. And these are over here. So we've got our person, basically, and we have our address. And you'll notice there's kind of a similar structure here, right? So what does the person contain? Name, ID, name, and address, right? And so that basically allows us to, you'll see the benefit of this as we go forward. So the first thing is whenever you're coding in core data, you want to get this context. So the context is a scratch pad. It's like basically your window to core data, your tunnel to core data. So what you want to do is I import the app delegate class. I used UI application shared application, which gets me the main application object .delegate. Essentially, this gets me I can't just create a new app delegate. I have to get the one that is executing for my program, the specific app delegate. And this command will get you that app delegate. And then here, with the context, we go to our app delegate and we call the manage object context method. So that will return the context. So now we have it stored. We have it in our interface, so it's instant variable, so all our methods can see this. Okay? So I saved it after that. I don't think I had to do that, actually. But then we load text view. And what that does is it loads all my data from the core data into the text view. All right, now this is obviously just a string here. I just keep adding things to the string, but the key part in terms of core data is right here. So whenever you want to fetch something from the context, you need to create a fetch request, and you need to give it an entity name. Okay, in this case it's person because we want to fetch the person entity. And then you do context execute fetch request all people into this array. Now I have my managed objects. Okay. And because this person was the class we've generated, so we can use objects of a pointer of this person type, and we can use this to easily access the different attributes of the person in question and the relationships. So when there's a relationship, I just do .address, that gives me the address object, and then .road name gives me the name of the road. So that is that. And that's how then I just put it into the text field. That's how we created the object. Now, to delete objects, if you see down here in clear, you have to do a fetch request again. So I did similar things here. Fetch all of them, and you just do context delete object in that case. One of the things to remember is these fetch requests can also take a predicate, and this would let you basically fetch not all of the objects, but just a certain subset. Like I want to fetch all people whose name starts with N. I could do that with a predicate. I haven't created an example here because I think this is simpler. And then the last portion of it is when we add the objects. So whenever it hits OK, we get the manage object model, and I think I get the entity description from that. So we get the entities by name, object for key, person. So that's just KVC stuff right there. If you don't know what KVC is, I don't think I've covered it. Just look it up. It's very easy. It's just similar. Another way to do the same thing. And then we basically do this as our alloc statement. Instead of init with entity, the entity we made here, and then we insert into manage object context our context we got in the view to load, and then we just set the attributes, and it's pretty easy. Context save, that means we've saved it. That's what I talked about with its interfacing with the persistent store coordinator. Then I load the text view again. So I think that's a pretty simple example, about as simple as I could draw up anyway. And this has been another iOS tutorial.